Picture this. It's 30 minutes before tip-off. You've got a student texting you, "Where do I go?" Another one just showed up, but doesn't know which camera is even theirs. Your producer is figuring out the software for the first time, and the last 10 minutes have been an absolute blur. And then you hear the buzzer sound for warm-ups to begin, which means 20 minutes until you've got to be live and ready to go. And you're running between all of it again. And that's when you think, man, we just need to practice more next time. But here's what I want to challenge today. Practice isn't the problem. Preparation is. And those aren't the same thing when it comes to student-led broadcasting. Game day chaos almost never starts on game day. It starts the day before, the week before, or even the month before. And that's what this episode is about. So let's get into it. Welcome back to the Broadcast Ops Playbook. This show is for teachers building student-led broadcast and media programs and trying to do it without the chaos, burnout, and juggling 10 different tools. I'm your host, Taylor Siebert, and we are 7 episodes in. And if you've been following along, you know you've been working through this season arc one piece at a time. Episodes 4, 5, and 6 were all about ownership and systems, clear roles, real accountability, and why gear without structure always lets you down. And now we're in this new section in episodes 7, 8, and 9, which are about operations, how programs actually run. And we're starting this new section with something I think that every broadcaster, a broadcast teacher, has felt because, I felt it before as well. And that's part of the pre-event preparation. So Hoosier, I know we're at the end of April when we're recording this, end of school year, and I know you've been spending a lot of time this semester with teachers as they kind of wrap up spring sports, thinking about this last winter sports. And what are you seeing out there? What are you hearing? What have teachers been excited about heading into the end of the school year and summer and thinking about next school year?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we've recently ran with a small group of our teachers, we call it the Spring Sprint. And that was basically taking some of the concepts of this podcast, but doing them live with the teachers. And so they've really enjoyed that. But just the overall feeling that there's a lot of stuff that happens at the end of the school year. And there's also your seniors that are going to be graduating and leaving. So do you have everything documented? Part of building this podcast and walking through all of these things is so that you have documentation, because your students are going to graduate, and if they take the knowledge with them, then you're starting over from square one, and we don't want to do that. We want to build a program year over year. And so I think that idea of the worry about what am I going to do when my senior graduates, plus it's just a really busy time of year. Everyone's stress levels are a little bit higher, including ours at times, of just trying to, they're putting gear recommendations in, kind of like what we talked about last episode with grant writing, and trying to get things purchased that they've gone the entire school year without, and they're like, I need this. Or sometimes they say, I've got a bunch of money, where do I spend it? And so just a busy time of year, but also exciting that we're about to wrap up and finish another school year, and the earth keeps spinning. So that's good.
Yeah. And this is a little bit, maybe the timing's a little bit off as you are listening to this. Maybe you're listening to this in August and you're preparing for this next school year. Whenever you are, one of the things we always hear from teachers was, man, game days are rough. And that usually means that 30 minutes, like I described in the intro, before tip-off is an absolute scramble. And the questions that shouldn't have been questions are being asked, and the stuff that should have been handled already is not. And that's what we want to talk about today, and why it's important, and what to do about it when this next year starts, and some things you can start to prepare for. Maybe it's just you going through that this summer, as a teacher preparing for the school year, you're doing this with the students. We've got a PDF that goes along with this episode that you can kind of start to map out some of the pre-event checklists that you can prepare for and do in school. And so one of the things about game day chaos, which is real. We've all experienced it. If you haven't, we'd love to talk to you about the things you've done to prevent that. But teachers experience it as a game day problem. They think about game day chaos as it's just happening on game day. But almost every time, it's actually the preparation that's the problem that's just become visible on a game day, right? So think about what the symptoms actually are. Students stand around when they arrive waiting for someone to tell them what to do. That's not a game day problem. That's a missing pre event protocol system. Last minute scrambles with gear. We've all been there. Hoosier and I can attest to that. Cables that aren't where they're supposed to be, batteries that weren't charged. That's not a game day problem. That's a missing equipment check process. The where do I go text that we described at 5:45 when the broadcast starts at 6. That's not a game day problem. That's a missing call time expectation and check-in system. Like, what time do we need to be there? And you're ready for the role that you're going to be doing that night. The event doesn't create gaps. The event just makes it impossible to ignore these glaring things that come up in game day and create that chaos. And one of the things we keep coming back to is this: if students don't know what ready looks like before they arrive, they will wait for you every single time to tell them where to go and what to do. We've been there and done that. So Hoosier, when you walk into a school, or maybe even think about our state events, we haven't had a pre-event process in place, what does that 30 minutes look like, and what's the teacher doing? If you could take us through that.
Yeah, I mean, it is chaos. So I'm going to try to visualize the chaos for you, because this is where it gets really fun. Um, we'll take state events as an example, because that's something that I've been heavily involved in and have been the one that is probably the biggest agent of the chaos. Um, when we would have state basketball, we would have this turnaround of 20 minutes in between games. And before we really started, getting our act together and figuring out how to best run this event, we would change crews every single game. Well, here's the problem with that. If you tell somebody that they're supposed to show up an hour before the event, that's fine. But when they show up an hour before, you better have somebody that's ready to get them in, or have a process in place so they can actually get in. And so our old way of doing it required me to basically leave the production that was currently going on for that game, or send somebody else to go down and get the next group in, and then have them just sit around and wait because there's a game going on, and then help the current crew wrap up, and then ask them questions. But then it was very quick. All right, goodbye. The next game's starting. Like, I would love to talk to you guys more about the experience, but I've got to get this next crew going. And so it's very much a in out, right? It's just chaotic because something might break. And at the time, we never had like a training process. And again, hindsight is amazing. I don't know why we ever expected them to understand our system
Yeah.
without training them on it.
Yeah.
Because the gear that we have, our new VMix machine, or now it's not new anymore, it's been used for 2 years. But there's only 2 other schools that we work with that show up to that event that have it. And ours is set up similarly, but kind of differently. And so, to me, after seeing that and having that realization, I'm like, oh yeah, we probably should train them. We should give them our expectations, because when we don't, they just show up, and all of a sudden I'm like, all right, who knows what they're doing? And they all say no. And then I have to take it one kid at a time. And on a crew of 8 kids, I mean, even if a kid just had 2 minutes of questions, it's 16 minutes that is taken up answering questions. And usually they don't just have 2 minutes worth of questions. It's usually a lot more. And so you just start to think about that and the quantity of students. And it's like, yeah, we really need what we have in place now, which is a pre-event meeting plus the training resources was 100% necessary, because I would end each day like there's 6 games a day, and I would just go back to the hotel room and just like, nobody talk to me. I don't want, nobody can communicate with me, even on my way out of the arena. It's just like,
Yeah.
I have done too much communication on the actual day, so much more than I needed to, just because we didn't do communication ahead of time.
And that's what a teacher is feeling like every time they are setting up. A lot of times, it's just exhausting and they burn out, right? And so one of the things, I've said this, and maybe you as a teacher have as well, is, man, I just need better students, or we need more practice. And neither of those sometimes are the actual problem. The problem is that we didn't define what preparation looks like in preparing those students for that. And then maybe things would look different. So every game night, you as the teacher, or for us in our case, we became the operating system. Everyone had to rely on us to tell them what to do every single time. And we know from episode 3, if you listen to that, go back to that is not sustainable. The UOS is not sustainable at all. So why does this keep happening? If you're a teacher, you're like, man, every game feels like I'm starting over. Why? Because we believe most programs, and we know this from our experience, as Hoosier just described, you're focusing almost entirely on what happens during the event and almost nothing on what should happen before students arrive. And that was where everything flipped for us in building out the system, is putting in all the work before the event so that when they got there, things would run smoother, all the way to the check-in process of them getting to us and not having to physically go down there to let them in. And the assumption is that students who've done this before, which we know, is that they'll just figure it out. They've done it, they know, they'll handle it. But we've done this before is not a system. It's typically an assumption, and assumptions don't hold when a student is new to a role, or they get distracted, right? Or just hasn't thought about the broadcast since last time they did it a couple weeks ago. They didn't think about it at all. And you as the teacher end up becoming the default answer to every pre-event question. That's when the texts start. What time should I be there? Where's the equipment? What am I running tonight? And the teacher answers every single one because there's nowhere else for the student to look. Nothing's been documented. And sometimes we get into a trap where it's like, man, my students just aren't motivated. Or, this isn't it's not a student quality problem or a motivation problem. There's a difference between telling students when to show up and telling them what to have done before they arrive. And most programs, us included, only do that first one. Here's when to show up. We didn't tell them what to do ahead of time. And you've heard us talk about Jordan Burns at Nixa. He had this experience early on in his program. He was fielding calls and texts an hour before every game. And not because the students didn't care. They did. But there wasn't a protocol. There was no process for them. And so they didn't know what prepared looked like. And once he built those checklists and pre-event checklists that we're going to go through here today for each role, the text messages started to disappear. Not because his students got better, but it's because the system got cleaner and his students absolutely thrived in it. And we believe you can do that as well. Hoosier, I know you talked a little bit about the scale that we've done with 100 students. When there is no pre-event structure in place at that level, what breaks down first? Got to pick one.
Yeah, I was gonna say what truly happens first. I think what breaks down is the level of expectation, right? So the standard of broadcast. If that's one thing that you and I can kind of pat ourselves on the back for in doing these productions, is this year I would say, with everything we did, all of the broadcasts looked very, very similar in quality. And that's not a low quality, that's a pretty high quality and a pretty high standard of what the expectation is. In previous years, without clear expectations set, you would see all kinds of things that I would just like, I'd like, I'd bury my head in my hands, like, what in the world are you doing? Like what on this earth said you need to do this? Like, it's just some of the, nothing's dumb, but it was just not smart, which is probably dumb. So, but you can't say that to the,
as it was a reflection on us, right? Because we were
well,
like, well,
yes,
we didn't.
Like when you reflect on it, yes, it was our fault, right? When we have to take responsibility because it's our thing, and we didn't train them right. But upon doing that and setting the expectation and setting the standard, the quality of the broadcast this year, there was never one. Even the crew. I mean, I'm going to give a shout out to my Sutton kids, the kids from Sutton. They've never done a large multicam broadcast like this ever, and yet it still almost rivaled the quality of the programs that have been doing multicam at their school for every game for the last 4 years, right? And it was because of that training. It was because they cared about it and they had attention to detail. And of course, between the days, you and I overseeing them to make sure that we were continuing to meet those standards. But I mean, that was kind of the moment where it didn't click because it already clicked, but it proved itself to me, right? I saw these kids that had never done this do it, and I was like, oh, okay, this is possible. And it just, we needed that piece of training before and setting the standard.
Yeah, the system, right? And you as the teacher shouldn't be the answer to every question leading up to the event. Maybe to start, but starting to document those things, the system should be the answer, right? And when you don't have a system, you become one by default every single time. And so let's get into, how, so we kind of named what game day chaos actually is. If you didn't kind of recognize that, sometimes you're just like, oh, this is just the way it is every single time. Well, we're trying to explain to you, no, there's an alternative. And here's 4 steps that you can do in the PDF. And I'll maybe share it while you're talking, Hoosier, to kind of highlight some of the things you talk about. And so let's talk about what to actually do about it. So I'm going to hand this over to you, Hoosier. You've done this and built it with schools and students, like you just talked about, to walk them through it.
Yeah, well, I want to put one more thing. Just
you didn't add a bonus step on me, did you?
No, but this is I want to double down on something you just said.
Okay.
The chaos, it doesn't have to be that way. If that's one thing I've done in my life, is I've always challenged, why does it have to be this way? Right? I never go in saying, oh, this is just the way it is. I've always questioned it. Now, sometimes I've gotten the response, well, this is why we do it. And I'm like, okay, that actually makes sense. And I'll back off. Like, I won't push the issue. But I never just want to go into something saying, well, this is just what it's like. Well, why? If it could be better, right? If it could be less chaotic, why not go for it? And so that starts with these 4 steps, in my opinion, is really what helps challenge that, right? Define ready for each role. That's step number 1 that we list, right? When a student shows up, how do they know that they are ready for the game? How do you as a teacher know that your students are ready for the broadcast? And that starts with the checklist. And of course, going back to the airline pilot analogy that I use so often, just because I'm a nerd like that sometimes, but the pilot knows the plane is ready to take off when they complete the checklist of steps to start it up, to taxi, and they have the ready for takeoff checklist. If they don't complete all those things, they shouldn't take off. If they haven't checked all of the things, that they haven't put all the the switches and knobs in the right spot, that plane should not leave the ground, because who knows what's going to happen up in the air, right? The same way with your broadcast. If you have not checked off all of the things that you need to get done before the broadcast happens, you should not hit stream. And I understand that you're like, whoa, but we have to be live before the event. Well, yes, you should complete your checklist before the event, right? And so that's really when I say define ready. For a camera operator, that's during class, are the batteries charging? Especially if you're going to be operating a wireless camera that needs to be on the go. If you happen to record like just the raw camera angle with your main camera, do you have an SD card that's going to have enough space? Does your Zoom controller work? Do you have cables that are actually going to connect when you put them together? What are the things that you can do before you show up to the game to make sure when you do show up, everything works fine? What are all the testing, all the things, right? So we look at this example here of our pregame prep template. If you're an announcer, like, please don't be writing down the roster when they're doing the 20-minute warm-up, because you need to have that already, right? You need to print the rosters, team notes before the game. You need to have pronunciations, at least what your guess is before the event. And then when you show up and they're doing the warm ups, you need to go over to the bench and like say, hey, how do I actually say this? You need to do a mic level test. Are you loud enough? Right? There's audio bars that'll tell you that. So thinking through all of these things, these are examples by role. And if you can complete these, if you have all of the appropriate gear and have it set up, and you have all of your pregame tasks checked off, then you are ready for the broadcast. And that's step number one.
I'm going to interject right there to give you a pause. This item right here, pronunciations, was one of my biggest focuses in for the state tournaments. One of the pieces of feedback that we get every year from fans will say, man, students were great, but they didn't pronounce the names right. We get it every year, right, Hoosh?
Oh, yeah.
And so we built into our checklist this year in Broadcast Ops, the software that we built to help teachers have these pre-event checklists built right into the system. The students, the ones I ran, and maybe you helped them too, Hoosier, went down to the coaches, the announcers did, to get those pronunciations. I shared it what Trey did that at state. Trey Perry at McCool Junction, he did that and put it into Broadcast Ops. We have a section for announcers so they can actually put it in there and save it. So if you play that team again, you can have those loaded in there, or you can just write it down on the whatever system you use. But I wanted to highlight that because that is a huge pregame task. You could do that before the game too, right? Jordan mentioned his announcers actually call the coaches of the opposing team a couple days before, or if it's football, that week before. So huge, that right there, that item will elevate your broadcast more than you know, because the opposing team that's watching, that's the first thing they're going to critique, is if you know how to pronounce those last names. And there's always some tough ones.
Yeah, that is the second I finally figured out pronunciations. Not only is it professional and the courteous and polite thing to do, but you as a broadcaster, it actually relieves some stress from you. Like I remember doing some games early on in my announcing career where I wouldn't get pronunciations, and our broadcast was set on the visitor side. And so every time I'd say a name wrong, I'd kind of have people in front of me turn around and look at me. And so it wasn't even the people on the stream, it was the people in front of me. And I was like,
yeah.
Then you start, second guessing yourself on everything and what you're saying, and it can spiral out of control. And that, if you do checks before the game, if you prepare, you won't have that moment spiral where everything else starts to kind of collapse around you. You will feel prepared, which is the point, right?
Yep. Okay, step 2. I'll scroll up while you're going into step 2 because we have that on this PDF as well.
Yeah. Step 2 is give call time a purpose. The idea that we kind of ran with for state basketball was we want you to show up an hour ahead of time. Now, this year, we scheduled crews to do 2 games. So the way that Nebraska State basketball works is, at least for the games that we are in charge of, there's 2 games, then there's a session break. They clear everyone out, clean up the arena, bring people back in for another 2 games, clear out, and then the final 2 games. And so that we did the same thing with our broadcast crews. You're here for the first 2 games, then you're out. The next crew is here for the next 2 games. And so what that allowed was, hey, when we say an hour ahead of time, you're going to get here right as that other game is probably close to ending. That way you can kind of observe what the current crew is doing. And then when they leave, then it's on you as the next crew up to do your pre-broadcast checklist. If you're running a camera, you're checking, how do I loosen the tripod so that I can actually get it to go smoothly? Is it level? How does the Zoom controller work? How sensitive is it? Like, just getting used to your camera in the arena, because it's a different place, right? And so starting with that hour before, this is what we do in that, and then basically allowing me to, as kind of the production lead, go around and say, okay, now that you've actually had your hands on the equipment, and you've gone through all of your lists, do you have any further questions? Because as someone who is not perfect, I know that there is something I have missed in training. That's just, it's a guarantee, which is why I always ask any more questions, right? And so that's really the whole point of call time. So how you could do this at your high school, right? If none of your equipment gets set up like during the school day and you just set it up before the game, then the call time should probably be an hour and a half before. And students know when they get there, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to set up their piece of equipment. They're going to make sure the broadcast gear is all connected. And then they're going to go through their checklist, right? And so that's how you can take what we've done at State and apply it to your classroom, to your school broadcast. And also knowing that when you get to professional levels, or even Taylor, we just interviewed Mitchell Brandt, who was a former high school broadcast student. And he said their call time for some games is like 5 hours ahead of when the game starts. And so as you get into bigger productions and as your students get into college and then professional work, call times are still a thing. So we're not just making this up. And they make you arrive even earlier than you probably need them to for a high school broadcast.
Okay. So step 2 leads to step 3, which is student career
Yes.
check-in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the big thing about this is just making sure everyone is being held accountable, right? Um, the big idea here is that as we start to build out a program, we have student leaders, right? And so let's say you designate your director as your student leader for the game. That student is who the other students will report in and say, hey, we're here. Where's my stuff at? And they'll help set up and they'll make sure everything's ready to go, right? What we've built into broadcast ops is a system where they can check in digitally. So it marks the time that they actually get there. And then you, as a teacher, can kind of use that as like, all right, who's actually showing up on time, right? Or who's a little late, and that can help with the accountability for students as well.
Yeah, and
Right?
Jordan, just sorry to interject, does this check-in, which is where we got the idea from, is it actually unlocks the concession, like perks for the student. So they have to check in order for it to unlock a free concession item that they show the concession person. That concession person knows they've checked in. They actually, I think he set it up so they can see that on their end. So there's a system in place for that, so they can't, kind of fake it or just show up like, yeah, you've got to click that button digitally to do that. If you don't have a digital option, you could, have a physical sheet that they could sign their name or whatever, and that could be the way to unlock some perks. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and it just sometimes game night is chaotic.
Yeah.
And as much as we try to reduce the chaos, sometimes I'll be honest, I'll be like, how many kids did we have? Did we have all of the kids in the spot? Or like at state basketball, did somebody not show up? So I had to slide in one of our, utility people that's just kind of always there. And it's like, sometimes when you're trying to remember that at the end of the night, it doesn't work, right? And so by having a system like this and some accountability, it really keeps that there in front of mind and something that you can easily pull from.
Awesome. Okay, and then step 4, my favorite, which we've built into the PDF, so you can see we have actual examples, so you can see, what we suggest as far as gear and setup, pregame tasks, and what some other little tips, and then a blank one for you to put in 3 roles. And you can expand on this. You can make it in your own. Again, this is just to get you started. And then the last page is...
Yeah, the post-event debrief. I know this is 4th, and we kind of did that because of chronological order of game day. But if you are not doing this, you are leaving a significant amount of improvement on the floor. Like, this is something that Taylor, you and I do, in a business sense where, we have weekly meetings, we have monthly meetings, we do quarterly. Like, we're always, hey, we just did this. And we're always trying to learn, right? And especially in the education system where we want students to be learning, we should always be doing this post-event debrief. Now, there's a few different ways to run this, and we've kind of talked to a few teachers just to kind of like get the ground feel of like, is this actually possible? So, uh, the easiest way to implement this, if you as the teacher want to be involved, is you print out this page and you give it to each of the students that was there at the event, but you do it like the next morning, or if the game was on a Friday, you do it Monday morning. Well, what's the problem with waiting until the next morning? Well, sometimes students forget. At the same time, students can also actually take some more time to contemplate it. So that's why, in my opinion, you can either do it in the morning or you do it right after the event. And the really cool way that you could start to implement this post event debrief is after everything's packed up, your student leader can huddle everyone up and just say, all right, what went well? And they're taking notes. And then you can say, what broke down before tip off, or was it all good? What's a question that shouldn't have been a question that you asked? And then what are the changes? And the thing about this that could be really cool is instead of having each student submit this, even though I think that's good practice, now your student leader, who you're saying you're in charge of this broadcast as a student leader, now they're the ones that are seeing how their crew did. And their mindset then becomes, how can we change that and make that better? And so if you're a program that wants to develop a student leader, and I would encourage you to at least one student leader, if not multiple, have them lead this debrief. And students will be honest with each other, right? Hopefully they don't go immediately into hurt your feelings mode, and that's where you as a teacher need to kind of stay engaged with this. We want to make sure that any of the feedback is constructive and not just personal attacks, because that will do nothing, right? But if your director, who's your student leader, isn't making cuts in the right way, and somebody brings that up, well, you as a teacher need to then help step in and work with some of that. But yeah, I think overall this is a great tool, and it's something that we tried to implement at state basketball. It's something when we did our fall workshop uh, last fall that we ran kids through a simulator, and it was the first time we did it. And so after each group went through, I had them come over to me and I said, all right, let's talk through it. What did you like? What did you not like? Well, all the feedback I got from that then went towards how we kind of helped implement running the simulator when we went down to Nixa to help Jordan run his workshop.
Mhm.
All of that feedback played into it. And the only reason I had that feedback is because we did the post event debrief. So
Yeah,
if you need more
that's great.
convincing, I can give you more, but I think I proved my point.
Yeah, I saw this in action. I think it was a couple years ago. I went to visit Marcus in the spring, and they were reviewing a track meet production in class. And so they pulled up the live stream. I know Jordan does this too, and several other schools do as well. Hoosier will provide a production analysis for you. So not necessarily a debrief from the students, but he can take a look at some things on the technical side that he can help with. But yeah, it was a great. I saw Marcus do it in class. I was sitting there, and it was just really eye opening for me. Just the opportunity to kind of coach the kids and go, hey, this is what we can do next time. This is what I really liked, went well. What do you guys think? Give me feedback on how I can help you guys. What an amazing opportunity in education to be able to do that, just like a coach would on a sports team. You watch film, you guys can do the same thing in your broadcast program and class, and just continue to elevate it and make it better. So this is a free resource that you can find with the episode. You can find that at strive.education/game-day, and it'll be linked in the show notes for you guys there. So lots of cool things happening here. I know we'll kind of wrap this episode up here and kind of bring it home. Game day does not create chaos. It reveals whether your pre-event process is working like we just described. And there's still going to be things that pop up if you go by the book and do all this. Things will happen, but you're going to feel like you were prepared if you go through this a little bit more. And if every game night feels like a scramble, The fix isn't more practice. That sometimes is a technical view. It's building the system that defines what prepared looks like before anyone walks in the door into that gym. And so, again, to recap, 4 things that you can take away from this episode is define ready for each role, give call time a purpose. It's not just a clock or a time, but it's a reason, and put a student in charge of something. Teachers, you guys are great, but empower a student to be that person they can check in with and handle some things. And we can help you with that. And then most importantly, number 4 is the debrief after every event. If you have a class, it's a great opportunity that next day to do this in class and continue to improve. So now here's the thing about the timing of this episode. If you're listening to this now, a lot, here in this next week, it is May, right? End of April. And we're publishing this at the end of the school year. And so if this landed for you, this is the best time to actually build your pre-event process, is now. It's not during the fall season when you're already in it. It's right now or over the summer, and we can help you do that. So that's why we put together the free resource to fill that out. And if you have questions, reach out to us and we can help you. So you can go grab that again, strive.education/game-day. And we'd love your feedback on these episodes where we post this in our Future Ready Educators community. Please drop a comment and, maybe tell us what your pre-event process looks like. It might be completely different than ours for you at your school and what you're building for next year. And we will share those comments and get that feedback and put it in to this. We do a debrief on this podcast and we do a pre-event call to go through this to make sure we've got everything in place for us and we're landing the points that we want to get across in this episode. So we are excited to continue this, and we appreciate you taking time to listen to this. We hope you enjoy the free resource. And Hoosier, thank you, man.
Yeah, it's always fun.
Yeah, we will see you guys on the next one.